Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing today? This is Chris at Speaker's Corner, and we are live talking again about the Islamic dilemma. Now, as many of you may know, I've been particularly involved in the Islamic dilemma for the last 6 months. In fact, I've been actually writing a book for the last 6 months on the Islamic dilemma. And as far as I can tell, it's going to be the first book in its kind that really goes into this topic from a polemical point of view and also from a kind of academic style of writing where I include lots of references, a large bibliography that you guys can go into and find lots of resources when you want to present the Islamic dilemma to people. But of course, for anyone who's new here, it's good to just remind ourselves on what the Islamic dilemma actually is. So the Islamic dilemma is the issue that we find particularly in the Quran, where the Quran confirms the previous scriptures that came before it to previous prophets, namely the Torah and the Gospel, the Torah and the Injil, and yet the Quran seems to contradict these inspired, preserved, and authoritative scriptures in many different ways in its own text. So the Quran, on one hand, affirms the inspiration, preservation, and authority of the Torah and Gospel held by Christians and Jews in the 7th century, but also says things that are directly opposed to those very books themselves. The doctrines don't align, they fundamentally differ. It looks as if the Quran is trying to affirm something that it also denies. What is the best explanation for that? That the Quran is written by a human who does not have, he's not all-knowing. He doesn't have the ability to be an errant. He, in fact, makes many errors, and this seems to be one of the biggest ones we find in the Quran. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm going to give you some updates on this thing in particular, which I'm going to show you right now. This is a proof copy of the book itself, and I know you guys probably cannot read that to save your life, but you're going to have to trust me that this is indeed a book with actual text on it, since I can't really show you the actual contents, and it's probably going to be really blurry on camera. But it's an early proof copy of the book. I've had Amazon KDP send this out to me for me to review and just to make sure everything's looking good. I've since then found lots of formatting stuff that I've went through and corrected, and I've actually purchased another copy that's going to arrive in a few days for me to look at again. But yeah, we're almost, excuse me, my cough is still here, by the way, so have patience with me. I still have this really annoying cough. The Mubahala with John Fontaine, that was many, many months ago. It's still here. I'm still under Allah's curse, apparently. I'm just never getting better, which is really sad. It's either that or it's the fact that I have children who have gone into nursery and I'm now catching all their diseases. I think it's more likely that, but who knows? Maybe it's the Mubahala that I never did. But anyway, yeah, so proof copy of the book is actually out, which is looking amazing. David Wood actually gave the foreword. He's written it and he sent it to me early this morning. So that's now been done. So the book is now feature complete, as we say. It's now totally ready. All the content's all there. It's fully written. It's now just a case of proofreading it and making sure I haven't made any silly errors. After all, this book needs to be immaculate. It needs to be infallible so that it meets the Quran's criteria for being from Allah. And it also needs to have the cover design so it doesn't look like some random thing I found on some template that I found for printing these kind of books. So other than that, yeah, we're in a really good place. So thank you guys for joining. I'm now going to have a look at some of the chat. Also, remind me for the life of me to not forget super chats. If there are any mods here, please remind me, because I have an awful habit of just forgetting. And then I hear people like tell me afterwards, like, Chris, where's the super chats? And I'm like, oh, I totally forgot. Oops. So yeah, do remind me. Okay, cool. Heroes Workshop says 100% buying this. Thank you very much, man. Much appreciated. You followed up with when does it come out? The date is yet to be set because I don't want to set a date and then have to push back on it and change it. I think that will annoy people to death. I also know that you guys are being really patient with me in this coming out, and I really appreciate that. I want to make sure this is a good work, which is why I'm taking my time with it and doing everything in the most professional way that I can. I could have done this in a non-professional way. I didn't have to pay for a copy editor. I didn't have to proofread it to death and have an entire community of people who have helped me proofread it to death. But I think it's worth it. And I want something that you guys can use and feel confident in using. So the date is going to be probably announced. See, again, tentatively next week or the week after is probably what I say, is when the date will be announced, because at that point I'll have the cover designed, and then I can basically be like, oh, awesome, now all I need to do is upload everything, double check one last proofread, and then I'll need to do some formatting for the hardback and the ebook versions. But then it's literally it. That's the final things. So at that point, I'll confidently be able to tell you when it's coming out. And at that point, I don't think it'll be that much more time after that. So probably early April, probably, as a guess. But as always, I have to say that with a pinch of salt, because you never know. I might actually read the book and go, "Oh my gosh!" It turns out I've accidentally deleted one of the chapters. Right? I mean, I don't think that's happened. I've pretty much memorized this book at this point, and it's 83,000 now, thanks to David's forward. 83,000 words, so it's bigger than the Quran itself. So not that I'm bragging or anything. I'm just saying, it's bigger than the Quran. Just saying. Thank you. Good to see you here. John 3:16 says, "Well, that's my even schedule clear then." Yeah. Economicon. Am I pronouncing that right? Economic Ian? I think that's probably better. Apologies for absolutely butchering your name, but it's good to see you again. I remember you from before. Definitely buying both yours and John Fontaine's book to make an analysis to see whose position is more historic/scholarly. Planning to come and defend tonight. Oh, awesome. I'll ask JC if he wants to join. I'd absolutely love that for you guys to join and just talk through some of your ideas. I think you guys have a really interesting perspective. I will push back, and I think the Islamic dilemma continues even if you're outside of the Sunni or Shia paradigm. But yeah, I'd love for you guys to come on. So just for you guys to know as well, I have put the link in the chat. I'll open it up to both Christians or non-Muslims and Muslims. If you guys want to join and you have a question about the Islamic dilemma, or you want to briefly say hi, I'm more than happy to let you guys come up as well. I also want to go through some videos that have some Muslims trying to respond to the Islamic dilemma, because I thought it'd be cool just to go through some of this and just rip it to shreds, basically, because there is nothing more fun than showing Muslims how they cannot respond to the Islamic dilemma whatsoever. Boring politician, good to see you again. Yeah, both you and Hatton are on at the same time. Yeah, I noticed this literally like 10 minutes before I started this live stream. I saw that Hatton had scheduled hers as well. So I'm like, oh. To be honest, I'm not even sure if we can, like, because there's so many Christians and so many channels making content and making live streams, I don't even know if we can schedule them so that we avoid like all the time. I mean, maybe if we were part of the same like media group that was all scheduled and all working from like one building, like one office, maybe we could do it then. But since we're all just based in different parts of the world, I don't know if it's possible to schedule it like that. But it'd be cool if we could. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Josie Glicias? Terrible pronunciation. Hi, everyone. God bless you all, my brothers and sisters. God bless you too, my friend. Arlette up north says, hello, everyone. Lee Riley says, can't stay, just dropping the word. Stay safe, people. Keep the peace. You too. And you'll say hello, Chris. Hello. Yes, indeed. Hello to both of you. Hey, Just Janice. Thank you very much, Just Janice, for being a mod and for helping moderate this live stream. Thank you very much. Allahu Akbar. Yeah, thank you very much for joining as well, for being a mod too. This is awesome. Let's have a look. Hi, this is Lambert Clever. That's French, I think. Hi, Super Saiyan Catholic here. Super Saiyan Catholic here. Blessing all listeners with rosary power until Easter Friday. Well, God bless you. And God bless you all, especially those who are currently undergoing Lent and you're fasting. So God bless. Baby cough. Yep. Yes, indeed. It's still there. I don't know why. I wish it was gone by now. It's a lot better, I think. I'm not coughing every 10 words like I was last week. So hopefully this live stream will be a bit more palatable to listen to. And it's not just going to be me endlessly coughing at you for 2 hours. So, hey, I can guarantee it's going to be a better live stream than last week, at least. Inquisitive Mind. Hello. Good to see you again, my friend. He says, congrats on your new book. You've come a long way, Chris. Thank you. Yes. I think it's been a really interesting journey. I'm really glad that I've done it. I will say, though, I'm also really glad that I get to go back to doing other stuff. This Islamic dilemma has been on my mind for the last 6 months. I actually found my video earlier that I made when I announced I was writing a book, and YouTube was like, "This happened 5 months ago," but I think it's technically more like 6. But yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing new topics as well. There's some Quran preservation stuff I want to jump on. There's also some numerology in the Quran stuff that I want to jump on. So I have some plans, and but also just making more content. I haven't really been able to make content like I used to because writing a book, my days, it takes up the whole of your life. I'm not kidding you. Because you think, oh, well, it's just typing words. And, if you've already said all these words and you've debated all these words, then surely it's not that bad. No, it's everything in between, right? I've never written 80,000 words in my life. The my dissertation that I wrote many years ago was about 23,000 words, and I thought that was a lot. 80,000 is something else, and it gets to the point where you can't have like a mental scope of what you've written. You can only like remember parts of it on your mind, and then you have to go reread entire sections to remember what was there. Um, and yeah, it's just crazy, and the proofreading is endless. And I couldn't have done it without certain people who've been by my side and who have been like proofreading relentlessly and making like suggestions and saying, "Hey, you could rephrase this, make this a bit better here." Um, so I'm eternally grateful for people who've been working with me to bring this out. So that's awesome stuff. I don't know if proud of you. Going to be a great read. Yeah, I hope so. I hope you guys really enjoy it. I think it's going to be a really great resource to help people just know the Islamic dilemma, know it in a way that you can confidently present, but also it deals with all the like the modern crap that Muslims have tried to bring up against it, so that you can be prepared for that, so nothing will catch you off guard. And I think that's brilliant. John Fontaine supposedly writing a book where he's presenting why the Islamic dilemma is wrong. I don't know if he'll actually finish that. I'd be very surprised if he does. I mean, I couldn't write on something that I knew wasn't true. um, I don't know. Maybe he will. I hope he does because it's great, kind of like interaction. So I love that. Dean's supposedly writing a book. I don't think Dean can finish a book. I think he doesn't have that kind of skill, like or longevity. So that's how I would see it. Let's have a look. John 316 says, but in your debate with John Fontaine, he is coughing and coughing. Oh, interesting. Did you all lose Mubala? Yeah, apparently we all did. We all lost. Ella was so annoyed with both our performances in the non-existent Mubahala that he's slowly striking us down gradually over many months. Let's put it that way. So who knew? Who knew you could do it that way? Steve says, leave some adverts for it on Dower stores. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll probably go to Speaker's Corner and probably bring some copies of the book. Well, when I go to the NAPC conference in 2026 this year in June, I will also bring some copies then. So if you're going to go there, then I'll see you there and you can get a copy. Just Janice says, Chris, I won't let you forget the super chat. Good. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Alex says, thank you, Chris. Going to buy it. Prof Yoffo, good to see you. Hello. Hello, indeed. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. The Triggered Christian. Hello. Good to see you again. What's up, peeps? Hello. La ilallah illa Joshua walam yekum Muhammad Nabiya. See, my Arabic. See, I figured out that a lot of Muslims, particularly reverts, just fake the Arabic like accent. It's almost in the liberal mind, it's almost offensive because you're pretending to be a different culture. But this is basically what 90% of like white reverts to Islam do. So I just figured, okay, well, if I copy them, no one can accuse me of like doing this offensively because it's literally what all the white converts do. And it turns out that's correct. Muslims will never call you out for that because they know this problem and they know the problem well. Apologetics England, good to see you again. Evening, everyone. Oh man, this is one of the things where if I keep going through the comments, I'm never gonna finish. Sorry about this. Lambert says Good Friday. You might be able to release it on Good Friday. That's an interesting point. I wonder if that will work out that way. That's really interesting. I might do that. I might actually do that. Oh, hello. Someone has joined. It's a good friend. It is Issa Kabir. Hello, Issa. How you doing, man?
I am good, brother. I love this topic, so it's just great to see that you're doing it.
Oh, awesome, man. Yeah, it's good to see you again. Hey, awesome. Yeah, what you call it? I still remember reading your paper that you wrote. Many when did I read that? I read that some point last year, I think, when you sent it over, and I think that was really good. I found that really useful. So yeah, it's always a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
I've also seen your debate that you had with David Wood against oh, who's it against now? Weirdly, oh, that's a
Ju-
junior and the other guy. You know what? I remembered the other
Great.
guy. I can't remember who junior was. But yeah, you did really well in that, and it
I
was a pleasure to
appreciate you.
see.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries, man. It's glad to have you here as well. So I am just going up with some chats, and then I'm going to review a video, and maybe you can
Great.
watch and add your commentary as well if you got things to
I would love
say.
to. Thank you.
Awesome stuff, man. Yeah. So just bear with me as I go through
I'll
some
just
more.
chill here. You're good.
Yeah, cool, man. Uh, Den Konzenit said 83,000 words to undo the entire theological history of Islam is a pretty good ratio. I guess so. I didn't set out to write this much. I just ended up having to write this much to basically get the argument out in a way that I was happy with. By the way, I consider it a minimalist approach to the argument as well. It's not even like all the different stuff. So I don't include what's it called now? The Quran talks about how no one can change Allah's words, right? Now, that is an argument you can make. I think that Muslims just about have enough to be able um, to somewhat give them enough room to be able to say, well, maybe it is just referring to the Quran. Could be, Lisa, I think you probably have maybe a different thought on that. But I think there's enough there that Muslims can kind of avoid the main sting of it. That might be a bit controversial to say, given that I'm the one presenting the Islamic dilemma. But that's just my perspective on it. So I don't present it in that way. The way I present it is the Quran talks about the Torah and the Gospel in particular, and it says they're inspired, preserved, and authoritative. And then it goes on to give doctrines that fundamentally oppose what we find in that Torah and Gospel. And then I basically say, yeah, it's this is best explained as being, in my view, the work of a human author rather than of a divine author. But that's how I present it. Uh, Bob's more coherent than the Quran too. I hope so. I hope so. I don't know if that's saying just how coherent my book is, or saying how incoherent the Quran is. I guess maybe a bit of both. Um, Before Easter, I want to give original gifts this year. Yeah, it'd be great if the book could come out before Easter. We'll see. Now that someone suggested that, I am actually kind of like, huh, maybe I could do that. Um, who knows? My birthday is actually on Good Friday this year, by the way. So that'd be another cool thing. But I don't know. We'll see. Before Easter, super chat. Would love to have a picture of you in it. Yeah, there might be a picture of me on the blurb on the back cover. Probably will be. But yeah, just on the back cover, I think. Jeremy Crawford, good to see you. Says looking forward to the book. Awesome source. And Zigam Gamiasa. I apologize if I butchered that, but I like the paperclip thumbnail. Congrats. And I am gonna have to skip a lot of these. I'm gonna start now, and I'll head back. I see that there's still some super chats. I'll get back to them. I promise. But I really want to get into this and just watch this video and just talk about some of this commentary. I've seen a little bit of this video. I don't want to watch all of it because then I feel like I don't know. I don't know. It just feels a bit fake to me. So I like to watch a little bit and then just decide how to respond as we go. But let's watch it. So this is this guy. I don't know who this is. I literally just went on Google and typed in the Islamic dilemma because I wanted to see what the latest videos were that people put out. I think this was done a few months ago, but this is a Muslim trying to respond to the Islamic dilemma, and it's hilariously bad. So let's go through it.
Before we get started, if you guys want to learn how to speak Arabic easily, then download the Kalam app. It's a fun and hassle-free way to learn and practice your Arabic. And if you're thinking about it but you're not sure, then just try it out. You can get a free trial using code RON. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and welcome back to the channel. I've been hearing the Islamic dilemma argument be thrown around a lot more as of late, and I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, in all honesty, it's a very, very poor argument. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Muslim. I'm saying that
You are saying this because you're a Muslim. You know what's funny? Muslims spend more time trying to cope with the argument than they do actually talking about the argument. They'll be like, guys, this is a terrible argument. This is terrible. I can't even believe I'm addressing this argument. It's like, bro, you're addressing the argument because thousands of Muslims asked you to address the argument. Stop pretending that you just like were scrolling on like TikTok one day and thought, I should probably address this random Islamic dilemma thing. No, no, no. It's a big problem to the Ummah. Muslims everywhere are really upset by this argument, which is why you guys keep making content on it.
because it relies on a misconception of Islam. They can't even get the representation of Islam correct to make an argument against it. They have to erect a straw man and then throw punches at the straw man. But I came across a clip.
Sorry, that's literally what they do. That is literally something I learned from going to Speaker's Corner, right? Just real quick, I'm totally not going to go on a tangent, but I am going to go on a tangent. Muslims will project every insecurity as a counterpoint. Like, fun fact, they're aware that they financially give bribes basically for people to join Islam. So one of the things they occasionally accuse Christians of doing at Speaker's Corner is giving people bribes, and it's really confusing because it's like, what evidence do you have of that? Where did this come from? And for a while, I thought there must be like, maybe before I came to Speaker's Corner, maybe this happened. And then someone pointed out to me, no, it's because this is what they have done, both in the past and, to my knowledge, still do. And they're just projecting it out on you. In other words, because they know they do it, they feel as if Christians must also be doing it, right? And everything is just projection. Every insecurity is just their own failings and their own psychological burdens that they can't carry, so they just project it out onto you. And when I realized this, I couldn't believe how obvious it was and how it just applies to everything. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see this guy doing the same thing.
Of a pastor who, in a strange way, knowingly refuted the Islamic dilemma argument. He also unknowingly refuted it in a different sense, but I'm going to discuss all of that in this video, inshallah. But first, let me define what the argument is in a nutshell. The long story short version of the argument is that the Quran confirms the gospel and the Torah that was in the hands of the people of the book at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. The Torah and the gospel disagree with the Quran. Therefore, the Quran refutes itself, giving birth to this dilemma. Is the Quran true? Because if it's true, then it's false. It's a very terrible argument, and I'm going to explain why. Before I get to the main reasons, I want to quickly mention the Quran does not talk about the Bible. These verses don't ever mention the Bible. It says the Torah and the gospel. It doesn't say.
So this is actually something interesting. Muslims are kind of right to point this out. I'm going to switch here. I think they're right to say this. The word Bible technically means biblios, a collection of books. Al-Kitab, people of the book, are mentioned, and the Quran is described as a book, Kitab. So in a way he's right, but in a way he's kind of wrong as well, depending on how you look at it. But if you just phrase it a bit better, then he could say, the Bible, in a sense of all of the books that you guys understand it to be, is not mentioned in the Quran. In other words, the Quran never gives out a detailed list of the canon. It never says, you guys have the scriptures, by the way, that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, plus the letters of Paul, plus plus the Old Testament. It never does that. Instead, it only names some of the things out by name. So, for example, it names the Torah and it names the Injil or the Gospel. It also does the Psalms, and it also does the scriptures of Abraham and a few other things, but basically that's it. So he's right in one sense, but wrong in another. One thing I just really hate seeing, though, is Muslims will be very disingenuous here. And I was watching this today, actually, with the debate that a brother called Timothy, a Speaker's Corner had with someone called Sabor. Sabor, I think that's how you pronounce the name. Zabor said to him, look, chapter 279, the do not write, woe to those who write with their own hands and claim this is from Allah to suffer a little gain. He said that's about the Bible. But in another breath, he says, no, the Bible's never mentioned in the Quran. And it's like, well, hang on a second, is it mentioned or is it not? Because you said 279 is condemning the Bible as being corrupt. But in another verse, you're saying the Bible, another sentence, another utterance from his mouth, he says, look, the Quran never even addresses the Bible. It never mentions the Bible as we understand it today. So Muslims will flip between these two, and they do so basically hoping that you don't call them out on it. If a Muslim is playing the Bible's never mentioned argument, feel free to just in your head be like, that means they can't say the Quran says the Bible's corrupt, because according to them, the Quran never even mentions the Bible. So worth keeping in mind.
Bible. So for any Christian who thinks, oh, it's confirming the Bible, that's not even the discussion that we're having. So the more experienced apologist says, okay, well, it's confirming the gospel and it's confirming the Torah, which we have today. The problem is we don't have the gospel today. We have the gospel according to Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. They differ in different places, and they're all written anonymously by people who did not witness Jesus. So we don't know who wrote these and if they were actually credible.
Oh, so he just put his foot in it there, big time. You can see which direction he's going in, right? You can immediately see. So we know there's the John Fontaine position, which seems to be what this guy's going in. He's saying, well, the gospel and the Torah, it's not the gospel and Torah you guys have. It's some mysterious, magical, disappearing and reappearing other version that seems to be in the Hijaz or nowhere else, that no one could preserve, including Muslims, weirdly. After Muhammad passed away, it just vamoosed, disappeared, and left no evidence, no inscriptions, no writings that people mention it or quote it or paraphrase it or any of this. No. It just magically disappeared. So again, this sounds dumb, and it is when you break it down. But of course, for Muslims who haven't heard this might be new to them. So we should always keep that in mind. Maybe they're just not familiar with this. So he's going to say, look, you guys, you think you have the Injil, but the Injil was actually written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Therefore, it couldn't possibly be what the Quran is referring to. So my book addresses this in part one. Part one of the book is literally called the Torah and the Gospel are what we have today. But basically, the Torah and the Injil is the Gospel and the Torah. It's not something else. And this entire chapter is a very big, like a third of the book, goes through this and shoots this down on every single level. And you can shoot this down in so many ways that, yeah, literally, I had to write a book about it. So let's just go through some of the things that you can bring up when discussing this. The first is the fact that according to 7:157, chapter 7, ayah 157 in the Quran, it says that what is possessed by the Christians and Jews of this Torah and Gospel happens to be in a written form. It is written down. So whoever the Quran author is, they know that the Torah and Gospel are written works. And they know that it is possessed by Christians and Jews in the Arabia in the 7th century. So to say that the fact that it's written somehow disqualifies is not going to help, because the Quran agrees with you that it's written. And Muslims like this guy are going to say, look, it's something that was given to Isa. It's like an oral thing. It's not a written thing. But no, the Quran acknowledges that it is a written thing. He's then going to say, look, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they wrote all these biographical stuff, right? All these biographical accounts. Can't include biographical accounts at all, which is just factually wrong. The Quran is very clearly paraphrasing biographical material found in, for example, the Gospel of Luke, but it happens elsewhere as well, including the Torah. It does so for the Torah as well as the Gospel. So the Quran is perfectly A-okay with biographical content. The issue really is the Muslims trying to read the mode of revelation into the Quran, when I think the Quran isn't actually even trying to do that. The Quran is not saying Allah gave Isa the revelation, because it's trying to tell you the exact mode in which he did this. I think that's an uncharitable reading of the Quran. The Quran is actually just saying, yeah, Allah gave certain prophets revelation, and Isa was one of them. That's all it's saying. It's not trying to go into great depth about exactly how that happened. I think you can go into this in a lot of different ways. And he mentioned the whole anonymous authors, right? Anonymous authors. He thinks he's got us there. Muslims always think, you guys, anonymous authors. You don't really understand this. And Muslims will never try and explain this. And it's always so silly. But this has basically become like the de facto response. And I'm glad it has, because it is the right response when a Muslim asks you this. Who wrote Matthew? Or worse yet, who was Matthew? What's his surname? All these ridiculous questions. It's just to say, who wrote Surah 2 of the Quran? Who wrote it? Like, you guys think that Allah gave it to Jibril, Jibril gave it to Muhammad, then Muhammad told people, but Muhammad didn't write it according to you. Other people wrote it later. So who wrote it? Like, who was the guy that specifically wrote Surah 2? Maybe it's multiple people. Who were the people that wrote Surah 2? Name them. And then tell me exactly which parts they wrote. And they'll never be able to do this. They'll never be able to do this. There's no recorded tradition or hadith that will tell them this bit was written by this person, this chapter was written by this guy, this chapter was written by this guy. They don't have it. And of course, using the criteria of formal anonymity, can't pronounce the word, being anonymous, right? Formally anonymous. They have to admit the Quran is also formally anonymous. Nowhere in the Quran chapters does it tell you who wrote the chapters. Nowhere in the Quran anywhere does it tell you, by the way, this is Abdul of whoever writing this, so it can be preserved. No one ever says that. No name is ever given of the person writing. And of course, that's the criteria they use for the Gospels. And yet, when you apply the same criteria to the Quran, they panic and they go, "Oh no, I've just realized I don't actually have a way of defending that." Because there is no way of defending it. And their own criteria has just buried the Quran. There are lots of videos you can watch Speaker's Corner of Muslims being asked this question and they just freeze because they realize they don't actually know. So like they've learned to like apply this criteria to the Bible, but never thought for a single second to apply it to the Quran, which is hilarious. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep watching.
Aside, the writings in the Gospels, according to Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, are more of a story biography of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, when the Injil is revelation that Allah sent to Jesus, peace and blessings.
See, I told you he would say this. He's going to talk about biographical stuff and how biographical stuff, it can't possibly be that, because what the assumption is that Allah would not give biographical accounts to a prophet. That's really weird, again, because the Quran does give biographical accounts, even of Muhammad, like Surah 33, for example, to Muhammad. Muhammad literally gets his own revelation about himself in the Quran, right? But no Muslim thinks that's weird. Muslims just think, well, yeah, of course, if Allah wanted to give Muhammad his own biographical account talking about his own life to himself, that's perfectly reasonable. And of course, Muslims also know about Musa and how Musa got his revelation. And Muslims also tend to think that the Torah is the Torah that we have today. They're a little bit more open to that. And of course, that includes biographical account given to Moses about Moses' life, including his own death. So it's very silly when Muslims make this argument because they haven't realized, kind of condemning the Quran. But of course, to get out of the Islamic dilemma, you have to do something. And this Muslim's approach is just to condemn the Quran in complete totality. Let's continue with this very
be upon
enlightening video.
Him about the religion. So it's not just him, Jesus walked there and then Jesus walked here and then Jesus spoke to this person and Jesus spoke to that person. That's what the Gospels are like in a nutshell. I'm obviously summarizing them in a very crude sense, but the Injil is not that. Secondly, the Quran also makes very...
Okay, gotta jump in there. He says the Injil is not that. Funny, because the Injil, again, paraphrases and gives knowledge of the Torah in great detail. In fact, there are some aspects of the Quran that make no sense if you don't link it with the Torah. Surah Al-Imran, Surah 3, Ayah 93 is a good example of this. I might bring this up on the screen. Let me show you this, guys, because This is also in the book. Oh, actually, hang on. I might have given the wrong verse. No, I gave the right verse. Let me just show this on screen because it's important to know it. Okay. Here we go. So this is Surah Al-Imran, Surah 3, Ayah 93. All food was lawful to the children of Israel, except what Israel, i.e. Jacob, had made unlawful to himself before the Torah was revealed. Now, the next part of this is actually really interesting as well, but it's actually the first part that I want to emphasize and make this connection with. Now, this is said in such a way that it assumes the hearer of this Quran knows what this is talking about. They don't feel the need to explain what this story is because it's assumed that they already know about the story of Jacob and how Jacob made certain things prohibited for himself. And of course, we do find this in the book of Genesis. We hear about how Jacob wrestled with God and he chose to make the hip part of the body something that he would not eat from then on out. This makes complete sense if you know about this story in the Torah and you know the Quran is referring to this. But if you try and say, well, actually, it's not talking about the Torah you have, it's some magical other Torah, then you have to explain what on earth this verse is talking about because, well, you'd have to be like, well, I don't know. The Quran is alluding to a story that the Jews and Christians are familiar with, but it's not the one that you guys have today or in the 7th century or the 6th century, the 5th century, the 4th century. It's some magical other thing. But anyway, I thought I'd show you that because it's just one of the many examples I have in the book of how it's clear and evident that the Quran is clearly having dialogue with the Torah and Gospel that we have today and that we had in the 7th century. But sadly, Muslims cannot admit this because otherwise everything just collapses for them. So let's hear what he has to say.
Specific claims about this Torah and gospel that they had in their hands at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, saying things like they mention the Prophet, peace be upon him, they foretell the coming of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So if Christians want to argue that the Quran is affirming the same Torah and the same gospel that they have today, then they also need to affirm that the Torah and the gospel they have today mentions the Prophet Muhammad. Otherwise, they would have to say, well, it can't be the same because it doesn't mention the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
What is he talking about? This is an insane level of cope. Do you hear what he just said there? He's saying that if the Quran says in Surah 7157 that, and also it's hinted at in other verses as well, that Muhammad is prophesied in the Torah and Injil, the Torah and Gospel. And then he notes that it's not there, which is one heck of an omission because that means that's false prophecy from our perspective, but apparently that's not the concern. But then he says, well, you see, if we don't find this in the Torah and the Gospel, then Christians have a problem because it means that it must have been, and he's speaking as if there's no other option, right? No other obvious option. It must be that the Quran is referring to a different Torah and a different Injil. And it's like, but hang on, isn't the more obvious explanation just that the author of the Quran was in error when he told us that he is prophesied in our scriptures? I mean, isn't that like the most obvious and simple and clear and basic like answer you can come up with? Who on earth would be like, no, clearly he's referring to a different one? I mean, to give you an analogy of how daft this is, this would be like if you see me saying the Quran talks about there being one God, the Quran talks about a prophet called Muhammad, the Quran talks about how it's in continuity with all the previous prophets, Abraham, Moses, and Isa, and so on. The Quran says you should believe in 12 gods. And you hear this and you go, oh, Chris has said something wrong about the Quran. He said that the Quran says you have to believe in 12 gods. That's not right. That's not in the Quran. I guess the only reasonable conclusion that I could possibly come up to is not that Chris is in error and just made a mistake, which is like the most basic thing you come up with. You'd be like, no. It must be that Chris is referring to a different Quran that does say that you should believe in 12 gods. That's what they want you to think is the normal response. That's what they want you to think. Even though I've said all these other things that have clearly identified the Quran correctly, so I clearly know that I'm talking about the Quran because I've quoted all this other stuff that's correct, that's in there. I then say something that's totally off mark, and these guys are like, no. It's it's Quran 2.0 he's referring to. He's not referring to this Quran. The cope is real. And notice the way he says it really confidently, right? Because he knows that's a weak point. So he has to say it confidently to convince people that's the most basic answer when it's obviously not. It's only the answer if you're a Muslim, because you don't have another choice. The obvious alternative that the Quran author is in error cannot be an actual option for you. It's not on the cards. You just have to pretend you don't notice, which is really sad.
On him, they obviously had something else in their hands that did reference him. There are many more problems with the argument, but that's kind of it in a very basic nutshell. And I ended on that last point because it's funny that this pastor named Greg Armstrong kind of makes the same arguments, although I don't think he meant to. So in a video posted online, this pastor, Greg Armstrong, is basically role-playing with Avery, who you guys might know as God Logic, where Avery pretends to be a Muslim, and then the pastor is the Christian, kind of doing apologetics and trying to convert the Muslim and make arguments and whatever.
Speaking of prophecies, go to 48:29.
Muhammad is the messenger of God, and those with him are firm with the disbelievers and compassionate with one another. You see them bowing and prostrating in prayer, seeking God's bounty and pleasure. The sign of brightness can be seen on their faces from the trace of prostrating in prayer.
Yeah, you know the caliphs.
Okay, this is their description in the Torah.
Oh, okay, stop. What's the description in the Torah?
To keep the northern.
Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and his companions are firm with the disbelievers, and they got a mark on their forehead from praying.
Yes.
Is that in the Torah?
That's not in your Torah.
Oh no, but the Torah at what time? The 7th century,
In the
right?
7th
Oh,
century.
okay, so we should see that.
Okay, now this is why that's so funny.
So I don't know why he thinks that's funny, because that's the same problem he just pointed out before, which is that Muhammad is supposed to be prophesized in our scriptures, but he's not. That's not a selling point. That's not a big win for him. That's really kind of embarrassing. And this is what people like John Fontaine and Yemeni and some other Muslims, this is how they have to deal with this. They basically have to point out all the times the Quran says, in your scripture, you can find this thing. And then we look, and it's not there. See, what they do is they basically interpret that as a strength and be like, you see, this is proof that it cannot possibly be the Torah and Gospel you guys have, or what was around at the time, or before, or after. It must have been something else. But really, once you establish that it must be the Torah and Gospel, because the Quran clearly references it over and over and over and over and over again, and all the early Islamic scholars agree it's the same Torah and Gospel in the presence of Christians and Jews in the 7th century over and over and over and over again, you don't have anywhere else to go to. It just looks silly. It obviously is the same thing. I mean, in my book, I go into massive detail on this because it's really crucial to establish it is the same thing. The Quran author is clearly referencing it. There's no way around it. He's clearly in dialogue thinking that the Torah and Injil are what we have today. And this destroys this John Fontaine perspective, because now if it really is the same thing, then why are these prophecies not found? Why are these things? So 4829 was the one that Avery was asked by Greg, Pastor Greg, in the video. And 7157 is the one I gave earlier. Both are examples of supposed prophecies that are, or descriptions in 4829's case, of things that are mentioned in the scriptures, but they're not. Most reasonable people go, okay, well, the Quran has made an error then. It thinks there's something there. We already know it's talking about our scriptures. We've already established that beyond reasonable belief. So it's just an error. But they can't. He can't deal with that. That's just not a thing. So what Greg's pointing out here is exactly that issue. But this guy has to reinterpret it in a very weird Islamic lens to try and deal with this in a kind of copeful way.
I first saw that clip on TikTok, and it was posted by the same person who posted the YouTube video. The person who posted it is a Christian, and he clipped it, and he almost clipped it like a Muslim, because the clip I just showed you almost sounds like you're making a Muslim argument, that you're arguing the description of the Torah from the Quran is this very specific set of parameters, There's a very specific set of qualifications for what the believers will be. And that's not in the Torah today. Therefore, the Torah today is not the Torah at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, I'm not saying that.
No. Therefore, the Quran author made an error because he couldn't accurately tell us what is supposedly in our scriptures. That again, we already know is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John for the gospel. Although the Quran author seems to think like the Gospel of Thomas and the Proto-Evangelion of James and the life of Adam and Eve and the Cave of Treasures and all sorts of things are supposedly our scriptures, because the Quran author is a bit weird like that. But he thinks that, and he thinks Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, he thinks those are the Torah. And he may also think other things are the Torah as well, because he seems not to be sure, which is a problem in and of itself. But yeah, he's never going to address this because he's already drank the Kool-Aid. He's already dranken the John Fontaine Kool-Aid, and now he can't get out of that paradigm, and he's already sold on it.
It is or it isn't the same at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or if they had more, if they had less, because there are passages even in the Torah today that you can link to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, like the prophet like Moses, or when God promises Abraham.
Oh my days. Did you see what he just did there? Is he really doing this? Is he literally saying, on the one hand, you can say, no, the Torah and the gospel are not what you guys have today. It's something totally different. But on the other hand, he's going to say, you guys can go to the Torah and you'll find Muhammad mentioned there. What? So is it not the Torah or is it the Torah? You see, this is the double-mindedness that they have to. Basically, the way that John Fontaine deals with this is basically because he doesn't want to tell Muslims they've been wrong for the last 1400 years for trying to find Muhammad in the Torah, for example, in Deuteronomy 18:18 or Isaiah 42 or Isaiah 28, 29. Like he doesn't want to say you're wrong for all this. So he just says maybe the prophecy was in the original Torah, right? The real Islamic one, the magic one. But then that was corrupted and became this new Torah. It was substituted for this new Torah that we have today that's full of like corruptions. But for some reason, the Jews were just like, should we include this prophecy of Muhammad? And they're like, yeah, go on then, why not? So it makes its way into supposed corrupted Torah just because. That's how he argues, literally. That's how he does it. He just thinks that it's purely coincidence that it's done this. And he says this because, remember, from his view, the Torah we have today is not the real Torah. So he has no obligation to say that Muhammad's in it. But he knows that Muslims have been saying for the last 1400 years that Muhammad's in it. So what does he do? Does he condemn all his own scholars? No, he just says it's coincidence. I would have thought, and to be honest, I would think it'd be more like coherent and consistent if he actually just stood up and said, actually, yeah, you guys are all wrong. For the last 1400 years, all the big scholars, Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Sa'd, all these guys, they're just wrong. Yeah, sorry. Just totally wrong. They got it wrong, guys. But no, he's not going to do that. Gosh, this is bad.
That he'll make Ishmael a great nation. That only happened with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But it's funny because the pastor unknowingly just exposes an ignorance when it comes to the Quran and his presupposition that the Torah is intact, the Bible is intact. Now, I actually went ahead and listened to 2 whole hours of Greg Armstrong articulate his version of the Islamic dilemma argument, because he doesn't think the way Christians have been giving the argument so far is actually good, and it misrepresents Islam, which I agree with him. I think it definitely misrepresents it.
So he's being a bit, what's the word? He's saying a bit too much here. Greg does have a different version of the Islamic dilemma, which is basically the Islamic dilemma from the Torah. That's basically what his argument is. I actually think it's quite good. He focuses on the stories of prophets and how those can't be reconciled with Islam. I was influenced by his work, and you will actually find that in my book as well. I think that's a more safer way of arguing that doesn't lead you into other areas of the Dawah script when you give it, right? Because Muslims just want you to try and say Jesus is God because they have this ridiculous, outdated Dawah script to go through. And yes, it's all nonsense and refutable, but it's going to take you like half an hour to an hour to do it because they're just going to go through so much nonsense that it's going to just clog your time up. And when you start doing that and you try to and you're dealing with all this stuff, going through all these Bible verses to show them holistically, the Bible clearly says Jesus is God. You've kind of gone off the Islamic dilemma in a way, and you're now just talking about whether or not Jesus is God. And I know it's relevant to the Islamic dilemma, and it's a really good point to bring up, but I think we have to be careful and selective when we do it, because often in a debate context, it's just going to derail the debate. And this, I think Greg probably shares very similar views. I've had Greg on my channel and I've spoken to him. He just thinks that, it's better to present it from the Torah aspect, from the stories of the prophets, and show how that misaligns with the Quran.
Islam. The problem is Greg also misrepresents Islam, just in a different way. But if you take anything from this video, just remember this one point. The biggest issue with this whole Islamic dilemma argument is that it rests on the shoulder of this belief that the Quran affirms the entirety of the Torah and the gospel that the people at the time had in their hands, because it's
oh man, really annoys me. Like, I kind of got the impression this guy had seen some of my videos in the way he was responding, because he was aware that we can just be like specific and say Torah and gospel rather than the whole of the Bible. So I thought maybe he had watched some things, but if he had watched stuff, he would have known we don't need to say total confirmation. Now, I want to be very clear. I do actually believe the Quran is totally confirming the Torah and Gospel. I think it is. I think the evidence is overwhelming. I think the argument against partiality is huge. There are 4 main verses that condemn this, at the very least, and you can find that in my book when it comes out. So, yeah, I think the Quran is talking about a total confirmation. The issue is, though, is that a general confirmation is nonsense. First of all, it's, and thanks to Dean for doing this, but he basically gave a really terrible labeling of it, right? General doesn't really mean general in the sense that we would use the word. What they actually mean is partial. They really do just mean partial or specific. They think that the Quran is confirming a partial or a specific set of things found in the Torah or the Gospel, and not everything. Despite the fact that the Quran condemns this, despite the fact that this is never mentioned in the Quran, so it's bid'ah, it's innovation, which is according to Sunni belief, all innovation is in the fire of hell, but they don't care because they need to get out of the Islamic dilemma somehow. But yeah, it's silly. And for some reason, Muslims kept telling each other that the Islamic dilemma is dependent on total confirmation, like it has to be this specific way. But that's also obviously nonsense. Like, for example, if I told you I believe in the Quran and I confirm the Quran and I affirm the Quran, right? And then I say lots of things that are not in line with the Quran. And then you ask me about it, and I said, well, I only generally confirm the Quran. You'd be like, well, yeah, but all these things you've said all contradict the Quran in very big ways and substantial and thematic ways. So you can't just say, well, you're only referring to like this section of it, because you've clearly made all these comments and all these contradictions with all these different themes, that it's not like you can just partially select things and unpartially. You've condemned like the whole broad thing, basically. You know, like to go to the example of the Bible, if you deny the crucifixion, the resurrection, the ascension, the resurrection appearances, the baptism, the incarnation, Jesus being more than a prophet, that's how I phrase it, just to avoid going into the Jesus is God debate. Jesus being the son, the monogenes in a real sense, God being a father in a real sense, Jesus turning water into wine, which is not Islamically compatible, Jesus talking about eschatological issues in a way that's not compatible with the Quran. Jesus says that in heaven there is no marriage, and yet in the Quran it clearly says there is marriage. Like, these things are irreconcilable, and they're big, main, problematic issues in the Quran. And when you contrast this with the teachings of the Quran, because they don't line up. So how on earth can you only be like partially, because you'd basically be left with like confirming a tiny little bit, right? You know, it's like me saying I confirm the Quran, and when someone asks me what do you mean, I say, if you open Surah Al-Fatiha and you read the first word, that I confirm. And no one would take you seriously. Everyone would think, well, you're being malicious. You're intentionally deceiving people because you keep going around telling people you confirm in something. You know, you have nothing to stand on unless you follow the Quran. And then when people ask you what that is, you're like, oh, it's just the first word. It's just the first word. in Surah Al-Fatiha, they'll be like, no, you're being disingenuous. So let's keep watching what this guy has to say.
Says, we sent down the Quran confirming the Torah and the gospel that they have in their hands. But this is very obviously, very clearly, without a shadow of a doubt, a general confirmation that there are things in there that Allah revealed, not a total confirmation that everything in there Allah revealed. Allah does that with the Quran. This is the Quran in which there is no doubt. Allah says the Quran is the criterion. It's the Furqan. Allah says the Quran is the truth.
So just to jump in real quick, and this is, see, he's kind of confusing perspectives here, because when you start going into general confirmation, you're actually jumping ship. You're jumping into the Dean Responds Libiano camp, where they say, actually, it is the Torah and Gospel that we have today that's being confirmed, but it's just being confirmed in a specific way or a partial way, right? John Fontaine wouldn't really even use this terminology because he doesn't want to go that way. Because as soon as you go that way, it sounds like you're actually confirming, yeah, the Torah and the Gospel are what Allah revealed. There is revelation in the Torah and Gospel from God. But of course, he wants to deny that because that is a massive concession for Muslims. If Muslims today, in the 21st century, started going around saying that our Bible has revelation in it, that would change everything, basically. That and of course, Dean Responds and Libiano don't recognize this because they're not very bright, but John does at least, and Yemeni does, and they realize this is really problematic. So they're trying to fight against this view, which is why they're saying it's a totally separate book. It's not even the same book. It's something totally different. And I think when you go down that route, you end up making lots and lots of problems. There are some serious problems. I'm going to talk about a very specific one on Giant DOC's channel tomorrow with David Wood and Giant DOC, which will be really cool. But I'll save that for then. But yeah, I think this is riddled with problems. Anyway, we have a guest. Hello there, Nermin Koranist. How are you? I remember you from before. I think you're muted, so you might want to unmute if you're there. Are you there? No? I'll give you 5 seconds and then I'll just continue going, playing on with the video. And then I might bring you up later if you unmute. Actually, let's have a look at the private chat in case you've said something there. You have not said anything in the private chat. Okay, I'm going to move you down. There we go. So he's still in the stage. If I see you unmuted, I'll raise you up. Otherwise, I'll just continue onwards. How did I get to that? That's strange. Oh, that was your screen. Sorry, for some reason I thought I had like changed and selected a different screen. Right, let's continue.
Allah says the Quran has no iwaja, it has no crookedness even. That's a total confirmation. But rather with the Torah and the God.
Wait. I hate to be a pain, but it looks like it might be fixed now. Hello, Nermin. Christ, are you there?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I just had some internet connection problems. Let me just close the door.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
All right. You're analyzing Mr. Rami Khalil and his attempt to refute the Islamic dilemma.
Oh, is that who it is? I didn't actually take note of who this was. I just found the video and watched a little bit of it, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll see what he has to say, and I'll just review it live.
Yeah, he's a protege of Dean Response and Libiano.
Interesting.
He basically uses their arguments to try to solve the Islamic dilemma.
Huh.
I tried to contact JC at Quranic Endgame, but he hasn't responded. He had a live earlier today that touched on Maltese Arabic. So I don't think he will be coming today. He's probably tired. But anyways, I'm here. My internet connection might be a bit bad, but yeah.
That's all right. So, my perspective here in terms of how I would argue it from your kind of understanding would mostly just be that the Quran author is best seen as a human being who is influenced by human works, and he's unaware of this in relation to the prior prophets and their stories. So the Quran differs on the Prophet Moses, for example, because it's a different account. And I think we can find similarities in human works that come before the Quran. And I think that that's best understood as the Quran author just being human and wanting to engage with Christians and Jews in his environment. I don't think that a divine origin is the most likely in that instance, because I don't understand why a divine author who revealed both the Torah and the Quran would reveal the prophet stories differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I would say that the research that I have made tends to point at probably like a hybrid of both. That the Quran author does he sees himself as that God is in some way talking to him, but probably not in the same way as the biblical prophets. Like an analogy would be, I don't know how much you know about Mormons.
Not that much, to be honest.
Yeah, but like Mormons, they tend to say like, "Oh, God spoke to me. He spoke to me yesterday, and I heard him say this and this." So they believe that God is speaking to them all the time, just like He spoke to their prophet Joseph Smith. So when they say that God spoke to them, they still affirm the New Testament. They still affirm the Old Testament, and they have their own like scriptures, and they believe God is speaking to them. But it's like every time God is speaking to them, they don't necessarily believe that they are like biblical prophets, so to say, even though they believe that Joseph Smith was one of them. So I think probably like the truth is somewhere in between. I have a 3-part presentation upcoming with JC at Quranic Endgame, where we will be discussing this I/we references to the Quran. But a part of what we will focus on is traditionally people have believed that the Quran is species unique, that it's coming as like a new book and a new name for a book, and that it's like focusing on the previous scriptures. But the hypothesis we are postulating, and it's partly based on Odin Lafontaine's hypothesis as well, that the Quran was not species unique, but that the original Quran for the Quranic author, that the Arabic Quran for the Quranic author was the only Quran that matters, and that the Arabic Quran is positioning itself against other foreign Qurans that were probably like written in the Syriac language, and that these foreign Qurans are tritheistic Qurans, that they are like the media of the tritheist movement in Arabia. And this Quran, this Arabic Quran, which the Quranic authors are in the glorious Quran, this Quran is supposed to represent the Trinitarian media, like the Orthodox media, to counter these foreign tritheist Qurans. So if you see it more as media than a book, then you can understand why it's not only referencing to canonical scripture, but it's also referencing apocryphas, it's referencing church fathers, because it wants to be this Trinitarian media that wants to fight these tritheistic foreign Qurans.
So that's really interesting. And what you've mentioned hits on some really contemporary scholarship. I mean, I know you did also mention Ola. I can't pronounce his name.
Odin Lafontaine.
Lafontaine, yes. I've met him in real life, actually. He came to the NAPC conference in 2024. It was an absolute pleasure to meet him. He's an absolute gentleman, and he actually signed the copy of his book that I have on my bookshelf somewhere. So The Great Secret of Islam, I think it's called.
Exactly.
I do recommend people. Yeah, I really do like what he puts forward. And I think he's done tremendous work there. So you also mentioned the whole tritheism point. So the idea, from what I understand of this, is that there was apparently some sects or groups within Arabia, or like the north of Arabia, maybe, where they were talking about basically how you understand the Trinity, and some were saying it was appropriate to describe them in a way that very much sounds like tritheism to us. And so the Quran might be, in a way, responding to that particular group, and that originally the Quran might have been actually on the side of Trinitarianism, dealing with these heretical views of the Trinity. I don't know. The problem I have with this is, because, in my opinion, the Quran went through an editorial process, right? Because I think there's just too much in the Quran that looks like it's going a little bit against itself at times, and it's not. And it looks as if what was originally there was probably different from what we see today, and it probably was a lot more coherent originally than what we see today. And for that reason, critical scholarship, I think, kind of has this problem where, in order to discover these things, like, for example, you can say that Muhammad is not being referred to as the prophet in the 4 or 5 verses where his name occurs, right? You can say, well, actually, it's in reference to Jesus, or actually, it's something else. The problem is there's just not enough evidence in the text to show one way or another. Like, it could be, and it's very easy to see it that way, and there's reason to think so, but there's not enough reason to be absolutely convincing, at least not to me. I'm very sympathetic to the view, but I could never say definitively one way or another, because ultimately the Quran has gone through an editorial process. So kind of the point of that editorial process is to remove this kind of thing, right? What the Quran originally said is not quite what we have today. So you are going to see these hints, but you're probably not going to get enough to be able to concretely point there. That's kind of how I see it. I'd love to be wrong on that. But
you can postulate 2 different hypotheses for why Othman burnt a lot of the manuscripts. So there is an interview by Dr. J. Smith and Hutash. They're interviewing a really prominent scholar when it comes to the Topkai manuscript. I think it's Rami Salsaleh or something. And in his new book, what he's showing is that when Othman burned all these different manuscripts, he didn't only burn variations in the qira'at, like variations in the diacritics, but he also burnt variations that had differences in the rasm, in the actual yes. So that's what he's proving in that book. So if that is true, if his hypothesis is true, there might be 2 reasons for it. One reason is that they saw that some of these other Qurans that were burned were more clear in their Christological themes. So they were going against the standard Islamic narrative. That's one reason. The second reason might be that when the Quran, the Arabic Quran, is as a Trinitarian media, is fighting these foreign Qurans, the tritheistic media, and it actually wins, it actually prevails, there might be some remnants of these foreign tritheistic Qurans left in Syriac. And their teachings might be anti-Trinitarian. And that is why, but they're still out there, even though the tritheist movement is defeated. So when Othman burns those manuscripts, it might be that he's actually burning these foreign tritheistic Qurans or remnants on them.
Yeah. Just to jump in there. So first of all, I would actually have issue. Well, I don't know how much I should trust the Uthmanic account anyway of this burning happening. Like, by the way, what I mean by that is I don't. So, are you familiar with like Stephen Shoemaker? He wrote in his book "Creating the Quran." He calls into question exactly how reliable this tradition is. Of not just the burning, but of the whole canonization process of the Quran happening under Uthman. And he points out that you have separate traditions, right? You have the Abu Bakr tradition of the compilation in his time, and then you have the tradition of the Uthman tradition. And he basically points out it seems as if these were circulating as two separate traditions, and then they basically got merged together at some point to unify them. So I don't know. Again,
No, I agree with you. I'm very skeptic, and I do side with with the Shoemaker. But when I'm trying to extract like some sort of historical truth. If you go to Surah 10, verse 15. This is one verse that both me and Odon Lafontaine used to prove that the Quran was not species unique. But if you look at our verse, this is it does show a bit what I'm talking about, that whatever these other Qurans were, that the Arabic Quran is not postulating itself as species unique. So what I'm trying to say is, when it's like saying, "Oh, I confirm the gospel, I confirm the Torah," and all of that, it's not trying to be, okay, I'm gonna be like a copy of them. What it's trying to say is that it's an emanation of them, and that it's actually countering these foreign tritheistic Qurans whose teachings are against the Torah and against the gospel, and are they're contradicting it. But this Arabic Quran, the only one that matters, this Trinitarian Quran, this one has teachings that are in accordance with the gospel, with the Injil, etc.
I think that's a plausible hypothesis. The issue, of course, is there's just not enough evidence, in my view, to show either way whether that's the case or not. Because, it's a bit like once you have some, like, you can say, I wrote something, then someone added something, then someone did something, then someone whatever, and try to have an hypothesis about what our aim was, what we intended, what we were trying to do. But then as soon as you say, but then later someone came along and there was an editorial process on that very thing we produced, and all the others were destroyed, or that's the only reference we have, I feel as if that's, at that point, you don't know anymore. Because how do you know what they changed? How do you know what was removed? You're basically just, because you can't use the text itself to prove it either way, right? Because that's kind of the point of the editorial process, is to smooth all that out. So I think it's something that could be the case. I don't have enough to commit myself to it.
You can extract glimpses from it, and you can try to extract the editorial changes. Gabriel Said Reynolds, he is like he's right now doing like an attempt to see, like to analyze like shorter and longer verses, and to see if he can find editorial changes. I think he's working on it. But if you can show Surah 10, verse 15.
Sure. I'll bring on just to add real quick as well. I have chatted with Gabriel, and I actually asked him a question on one of his member live streams. I said, it was actually to do with Muhammad being mentioned in the Quran, and he suggested it's possible that his name could actually have been Ahmed, because Surah 61:6 says Ahmed, right, not Muhammad, and he actually said that people have pointed out that might actually have been his actual name, and Muhammad may have been more of a title or a descriptive term. So I asked him about this, what he actually thought, what his view was, and he said there just isn't enough in the actual Quran itself to fall either way. And that kind of got me thinking, I think there is just not enough in the Quran to be able to say either way for a lot of these things when it comes to critical scholarship, because things have been smoothed over. So we can't really definitively say. But I mean, anyway, I got the thing up on screen. So do you want to talk about this?
So in this verse, let's say that you, Chris, you make a great YouTube video where you want to refute Catholicism, just as an example, and you make a great video, and then a Catholic comes to you and he says, Chris, please change your video or edit it or make another video, because these are really bad arguments. They don't hold. Your video might be a really good video for you, right? Like a glorious video, but it's not species unique. There are other videos out there. So similarly, when the disbelievers here say to the Quranic author, bring us a Quran other than this or change it. They're not hearing the Quran is not species unique for them. It's not a new thing. There are other Qurans out there, just like for you, there are other YouTube videos out there. So they're telling him, your Arabic Quran contradicts these other foreign, better Qurans. You should change it to make it basically more tritheistic. Like your Quran is Trinitarian, but the Qurans that we like, the media that we like, are these tritheistic Qurans. So change your Quran or bring us another one. So this verse, but the Quranic author says, no, this Quran is divinely inspired to me. It is in accordance with the Torah. It is in accordance with the gospel. So I will not change it, because these other Qurans that you follow, these foreign Qurans, they contradict the Torah, they contradict the gospel, they contradict the doctrine of God, etc. So we use this verse, both me and Odon Lafontaine, to show that the Quran is not species unique, and that if you think about the Quran as not being species unique, that it can actually contribute to unraveling the knot of the Islamic dilemma. Not fully, but it can be like a start.
Yeah, maybe. I'm a bit sort of hesitant to see how this would reflect on the dilemma as such. I mean, ultimately, okay, let me ask you a question, and this might help. Would you say the Quran author, the Quran, sorry, contains human elements? Like, is the Quran as a recited and written text, is it just the works of Allah? Like, is it just the words of Allah? Or is it maybe like the words of Allah, but also the words of man?
Yeah, so from reading the Quran and researching it, the conclusion I have drawn is that the Quranic author is saying that it is the product of human hands, but that it's based on something called signals from the divine, like divine signals. So if you read Saint Murad's translation, when the author is saying the Quran is showing me this and this, it's saying like, this was signaled to me by this Quran. So it's like, it's the human there, it's human works, but he's receiving like divine signals, and he has to make sense of these divine signals and write them down.
That's a profound omission. Because I mean, in a way, I'm tempted just to agree with you then, because if, and by that what I mean is not to try and push further, because I think you've already met the standard here, which is if you say the Quran is not fully from Allah, there's also human elements in it, then I mean, that to me just opens the floodgates. That's denying the Sunni Shia perspective to begin with. But even from a Quran only perspective, I've never met a Quran only person that would say that the Quran is also the works of man in some way. And I would just be happy with that, to be honest. I think the Islamic dilemma has kind of done its job if we say that. I mean, I think because you just opened the floodgates to the Quran could have errors in it. The Quran is ultimately not Allah's speech. You have to redefine what this means. And again, I think my argument that the best way of explaining what the Quran author is doing, that being he's making errors, or perhaps he doesn't even care, so to speak, because he's a human being, I think that's the best explanation. And I think the Quran is just not divine then. It's not fully true. It's not from God. It's just a human author. But that's kind of how I see what you're saying seems to just work perfectly with that.
Yes, but you should also remember, like, when it comes to the New Testament, when it comes to the Old Testament, the mainline Christian position, I know there are acceptances to the rule, is that it was written by human hands, but it was based on the divine inspiration from the Holy Spirit. And I would argue, like, how is this different from the Quranic author saying, okay, it's by human hand, but I'm getting these like divine signals. So you could say that the authors of NT and OT, they had more clear-cut signals in the form of the Holy Ghost. But the Quranic order was like, okay, my signals, since I am confirming the Torah, and since I am confirming the Gospels, he wants to be an emanation of them, but not a replacement of them. So hence he doesn't necessarily say, oh, it's the Holy Ghost, in the same way as the writers and the OT writers of the NT and the OT based their works on. But instead, this is like, I'm going to do this divine media, and I'm going to write it, but it's going to be based on this Quran, this glorious emanation, signaling to me like the truth. Because really, what it's about, it's you want to counter actually two movements. You want to counter this tritheist movement, which is really big, and it has a big presence in Arabia. But you also want to counter the Masoretic movement, and the Masoretists also had a big presence at that time, but the writing of the Masoretic text was at its infancy. So the writing of the Masoretic text was a process that took place between, I think it was the 6th or 7th century all the way up to the 11th century. And the full codex, the Masoretic codex that we have today, is the Leningrad codex.
Right.
So what the Quran is, what is disturbing the Quranic author when it comes to the Masoretist is that when they're writing their text and they're putting up the diacritics, etc., that some of their like written interpretations of the text, so to say, when they're putting the dots and the diacritics and all of that, seems to contradict the prophecies in the OT, in the Old Testament, that confirm the coming of Jesus, the son of Mary. So they're trying to polemicize against that too. So they see the Septuagint as the quote unquote original.
Okay.
So that is like the enemy, the danger, the priority of the Quranic author, the Tritheists and the Masoretists. So it wants to counter them, and it doesn't really care about like being at the same level of divine inspiration as the Gospel and the Torah, because it just focuses on its near enemies and the near threat to the believers.
Right. So, I mean, okay. So first of all, just to start on what you originally were saying, yeah, the way that obviously we as I as a Christian would say this is, I would say, yeah, it's the Holy Spirit is inspiring man to write, and they write with the fullness of their words, of their language, of their culture, but it's inspired ultimately by God. So I don't have an issue with that, obviously. That is something I think is correct. I think if you try to apply that also to the Quran, I think what I would do then is I'd say, well, the difference here is our mode of inspiration actually works for our text, because our text, is in harmony with the Old Testament. The New Testament is in harmony with the Old Testament, but the Quran is not in harmony with either the Old Testament or the New Testament. And so that's where I would really disagree with you on that point. And I would say that it's, once again, that's best explained as the Quran author being a human being. He's not divine. He's not being inspired. He's just getting things wrong. Now, I do want to add, I think it's kind of unfair sometimes that we just assume that Muhammad or whoever is the author of the Quran, he got things wrong. I think sometimes, and I'm not being facetious, I really have to think these things through and try to give a charitable interpretation and one that best explains the data. I think sometimes he just doesn't really care, and he doesn't see things the way we see things. I don't think he's trying to re-give the original revelation in the Torah or Gospel word for word. That's not what he's trying to do. He's actually got his own objectives, and he's got his own mission that he's trying to work towards, and he's using the prior scriptures as a way of bringing that about. So he says things that he might, and whether he intentionally knows he's doing this is another question, but he says things like, I'm found in the previous scriptures. Now, I don't think he is. I think that's quite clear. And whether he knows that is another question. But I think, to me, it's very clear that he's saying that because it's in line with his objectives. He wants to convince the Christians and Jews to follow him as a prophet. And therefore, that's why he's saying this. That's why he's saying, yeah, I'm found over there. And when he says, Christians and Jews, they know Muhammad better. It doesn't say his name, I don't think, but they know about this prophet more so than they know their own sons, right? This kind of language is very polemical. It's designed to, it's basically saying it's so obvious to them that I'm a prophet, right? And I think that's what he's trying to do. I think that's his objective. I don't think he cares so much about being right, because ultimately people can't really at that time prove what he's saying either way. It's in a non-literate part of the world, so people don't really have access to the scriptures that well. So you could kind of say anything, and it will be a long time before you could know that that person is lying, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's how I see it.
Yeah, and this is the problem. If you do I have more time, by the way, or do you need to take?
So let's see. I'm gonna end this live stream in 35 minutes from now because I have a hard cutoff point at 10. It might be good if we let's say 10 more minutes, if that's all right.
10 more minutes. Okay, yes. So the problem with if you go by the standard Islamic narrative and you see Muhammad as the new biblical prophet from the Hijaz, what the Quran is actually saying is, it's not only saying that Muhammad is in the Torah and the Injil, it's also saying, and those with him are in the Torah and the Injil, the Sahaba. So now you have the problem when you have to shoehorn Muhammad into the OT and the NT, and you also have to shoehorn all his Sahaba. And which Sahaba are in the NT and the OT? But if you take the position that the Quran is addressing the Masoretists, and that is saying that the Muhammad, as in like some sort of reference to the Messiah, okay, some sort of reference to the Messiah, is in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, it makes a bit more sense. I can show you a clear example, because the Quran is accusing the Masoretists of corruption of the scripture when they are producing their Masoretic text, chapter 2, verse 79. And the result of the Masoretists, if you take the words of piercing the hands, in the Masoretic version, it doesn't say they pierced his hands, etc. It says something about the lion tore his clothes, etc. But it is in the Septuagint, on which the Syriac Shita is based, that it says they pierced his hands, etc. So it makes more sense that the Quranic author is saying, no, your Masoretic text is a distortion, but this Muhammad, the Messiah, God's Messiah, he is in the real Torah, the Septuagint, and not in your Masoretic version, which you are trying to produce, which is at its infancy. So when you look at what the Quranic author is actually trying to do, he's not trying to shoehorn the prophet of the Hijaz in the OT, but he's trying to prove that the Messiah is in the OT, and is saying that the Septuagint is the real OT, but the Masoretic text is the corrupted OT. And there are actually scholarly works, like if you take the works of Marcus Vincent in his book, Christ's Torah, where he clearly proves that Christ's Torah, or the Torah of the authors of the NT, was the Septuagint, and not the Hebrew Bible, not the Masoretic text. Even though I guess some would counter that we have the Qumran scrolls today, etc. Sure, but at that time, when the Quran was being written, the Qumran scrolls were in a cave, so they were hidden from the rest of the world, and the Masoretists and the Masoretic text was at its infancy.
So I am aware that in some of the quotations in the New Testament, it's clearly showing that they're more familiar with the Septuagint than they are the Masoretic text in quite a few examples. So I've heard that before. That's really interesting, the idea that might be what the Quran author is trying to do, and that Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 279, might be in reference to the Masoretic text. That's really interesting. Yeah, I need to look that up more. Is there any is there any scholars or anyone that you can bring up that I should look at to find out more, or because I'd love, or is this just your thinking so far, or because I'd love to look into that more.
There are
are they in different languages, or
so when it comes to the Septuagint being that which the authors of the NT base their works on, so there you have Marcus Vincent. But when it comes to the Quran, I don't have it on top of my head.
No, that's fine.
But it does kind of make sense if you think about when you have argued with Muslims and they say that the Torah is corrupt. You always say, but the Quran says, oh, you have the Torah with you. Why do you come to me when you have the Torah to judge? So the Quran doesn't seem to have any problems with like the judgments in the Torah, like the stipulations, the statutes. But then why is it saying that it's corrupt? Well, the argument that it's saying that the Masoretic reading is corrupt makes sense, because there is actually no problem when it comes to the Masoretic text and the Septuagint when it comes to laws and statutes. It's more about the prophecies of the Messiah and the prophecies that confirm the arrival of Jesus or not the arrival of Jesus. There's the contention. It's not that there are like different readings of the laws or the statutes between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text. So that would be like one reason. But if I can look into it a little bit more and give you like a concrete scholar. Right now, I just have a apologist that I can refer to, who is maybe he's a scholar. There is a Catholic apologist, Lloyd de Young. He has this, but I don't know if he's a scholar. I just know he's an apologist. But if I find a concrete scholar, I will get back to you more on this.
Yeah, no worries, man. That's really cool. Yeah, I've had Lloyd. Actually, have I had him on my channel? I've been on his channel 4 or 5 times or something. It was a while though. I should probably do something with Lloyd again. Actually, it's been a long time. But yeah, okay, that's cool. That's something for me to like muse on, because I've not thought about that before. But that actually could help make sense of it. Although the way I look at it is I read the next verse, verse 80, and because it describes what it's a continuation, and they say, never will the fire touch us but for a set number of days. I read that to mean that this is actually, because you find that in the Mishnah, in the Talmud. So I read that to mean that verse 79 is in reference to rabbinic material, like the oral law or the commentary on the oral law. But you know, it's still interesting though, that the idea this could be about the Masoretic text. I think that is definitely worth investigating.
It could be connected because the Masoretic writing is at its infancy, but they still have their this Jewish literature like in full written text. So the Quran could be hinting at like, you're producing this Masoretic text, but you're not being objective. You are basing it not on the true OT, not on the Septuagint, but you're being affected by your own writings, your rabbinical writings. So you're not producing like an accurate reading. Just one speculation.
That's interesting. Anyway, my friend, before you go, Isa, are you there? If you are, I think it would be cool if you have any questions or anything you want to add. Just your mic's muted if you're not aware. No, I'm guessing Isa is doing something else. But yeah, thank you for joining. It was good to have you. I find your perspective interesting because obviously you're looking at critical scholarship and you're making your worldview align with that, and I think that's always a commendable action, like something good to do. I don't think it solves the Islamic dilemma, though. I have to be honest. I still think that it leads to denying quite big things, and I know that you've kind of agreed with me on that, but I think that's quite substantial, and I think the dilemma passes if we've gotten to the point where we're saying that the author is both, the author of the Quran is both human and divine, like in the sense that it's inspired, but it's also the works of man. Taking the view of the Christian perspective on their scripture, I think that's game changing to me, and I think the Islamic dilemma passes if you say that. But anyway, I really do need to check your guys' channel out more, Quranic Endgame. But yeah, thank you for joining. I'm gonna go through the super chats and just have a chat with my audience for a little bit. But thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, sir. And watch the upcoming 3-part series on the I/we. We will talk a lot about the Trinitarian movement in Arabia, the Tritist movement in Arabia, and this about species unique, the Quran not being species unique, etc. So we have a lot of good stuff coming up when it comes to that.
Nice, awesome. Well, thank you again, my friend, and I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Cool. I take it Isa is still away. Someone did actually join in the backstage, and I was going to let them up, but they've disappeared now. So I guess that's the end of that. So I'm gonna go through the super chats and then I'll just have a chat with you guys. Issa's just gonna be chilling here, just in case he randomly appears back at some point. You never know. So cool. So Inquisitive Mind, thank you very much for the donation against Chris is Gabriel Said Reynolds' best student by far. You know, I actually took his course. Actually, you know this. You were the one who told me about it, actually. Gabriel Said Reynolds had a course where we went through not his latest book, but the one prior. And I passed the course with flying colors, and I even have a digital certificate of it. So yeah. I kind of hope he knows. Actually, yeah. I put it on Twitter or X, and he actually liked the post, so he knows that I took his course and he knows that I passed. So I am pretty proud of that. God bless, brother. Oh, thank you very much, Nova, for the super chat. Thank you. I think that's Australian dollars. I think that's what that is. Thank you so much for the donation there. We have CS Joko. It says, let's say we have 10 verses affirming the dilemma. Even if Muslims show 10 verses against the dilemma, wouldn't that just turn Islam into a huge contradiction? Yeah, exactly. It's ironic, but I say it's ironic. It's funny that their way of dealing with the Islamic dilemma is just to turn the Quran into a really unclear, contradictory mess. It's affirming things, but it's also it's also correcting them, but it doesn't say that. You have to read that into the text. It also doesn't correct everything. There are lots of things that it just leaves uncorrected, which I don't know is apparently not a problem. It's inspired, but it's also wrong. It's affirmed, but also denied. It just makes a mess, and it makes the author of the Quran a very confused person. And if I was a Muslim, I wouldn't want to follow that. I agree with Issa Kabir, who's on this stage but currently chilling. He said that, you know, if you really went with this idea that the Quran author is both affirming but also saying that these things it affirms are corrupt, you've made him into like a double-minded individual that just seems confused, and it kind of makes a mockery out of the idea that God would have this long-standing tradition of giving his people revelation through prophets if he just lets it get corrupt. Like he may, well, it's not even that he just lets these things get corrupted. Often he actually intervenes to make them corrupted. The crucifixion being an example from the Sunni perspective. So yeah, it's bizarre, in all honesty, that this is where we're at. But it's really good for us to be able to point this out to Muslims, and we're in a really great position here in 2026 to do that. Thank you again for your super chat. Inquisitive Mind again says, Paul says circumcise your Islam says on your heart. Sorry, I thought you were just like I thought you were just putting a symbol. Sorry. Paul says circumcise your heart. Islam says on your winky. Yeah. Interestingly, Gabriel Said Reynolds points at the circumcision of your heart as language that he borrows from the Old Testament in the New Testament in the letters he writes. And the Quran seems to be influenced by this, because the Quran also talks about circumcision of the heart, although the word it uses is not a clear one-to-one with that. But there have been people who have translated it in that way, usually because I've noticed the commonality between this and the Old Testament and Paul's letters. But it's interesting. It's an interesting point that Gabriel Reynolds brings up. Thank you again for that, Inquisitive Mind. Mr. Science says, I'm delighted to discover that Ron Weasley has found a second career. Just kidding. Big fan. You know, many years ago, my sister decided it'd be funny to dye my hair ginger, because my hair is not ginger. Evidently, it is blonde. And yeah, they said I look like Ron Weasley. And I haven't let them forget this, and they haven't let me forget it either. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Science. Although you're very wrong about the Ron Weasley thing. Thank you for the $10 donation. So let's have a look. Just Janice, if you were a Muslim, you would be insane, Chris. I guess I would be. You know what? A lot of the time, because I have a very calm demeanor, and I just I know a fair amount of the Quran and so on, and the Bible. So when I talk to Muslims and Speakers Corner, they notice this, and I speak in a very monotone way. I don't match energy, and I don't get heated. They they interpret this to be like, oh, this guy knows stuff. He would be a great Muslim. One day, inshallah, he will be a Muslim. And they tell me this. And I just go, oh, okay, thank you for that. I hope one day you'll be Christian. And we just kind of have this back and forward exchange. But Muslims, if they're not arguing with you, they're just really, really hoping that you become a Muslim one day. But if I was a Muslim, I don't know what I'd do. If I debated Islam, I'd just be a very deceptive person, and I couldn't do that. That would destroy me. I couldn't sleep at night. And I have this kind of principle that when I do things, I need to be able to sleep at night. So, yeah, defending the Quran, defending Islam, especially like Sunni Islam, especially like Salafi Sunni Islam, I couldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. I would just be a really deceptive person, and I don't think it'd be good for my soul, in all honesty. Not just because it's
wild.
Wrong.
So wild, man. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you.
Sorry, you're coming in my right ear really loud, and that just came out of nowhere. How you doing, Lisa? You right?
I'm doing good. I was listening. I was like, yeah, that's wild. I don't know why people want. I think people have to find what's good in their own spiritual journey. Like, it's a strange thing to say. You want to be this religion. It's like, it's not a club. You know what I mean? I don't think if you believe in God, it's not about being in a club. It's about actually having real, authentic faith, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I would only be a Christian if I believed it. I couldn't be a Christian because of the benefits, so to speak. I mean, I'm sure people like that exist, but with Islam in particular, at least with how it's seen today, you got, what's his name? You got Actually, I don't know about Junior. I haven't heard much about him, but you have the Warner, you have Sneeko, you have Andrew Tate, you have Libiano, you have Malik, all these people doing all these immoral acts. And they just treat it like a club. Like you said, it's just a big club that people go to, sometimes quite literally a club. And I don't know, man. I think they're live action role playing. I think they're just live action role playing Islam. I don't think they actually believe in it. And that kind of, I don't know. It's sad, really, that people do that, because no one really, at the end of the day, is inspired by people that do that. If you don't have any actual real conviction, I think that people can tell that, and people can tell real from fake. And these guys, I think they're pretty fake.
Well, you know, I've gotten to spend a lot of time with Dr. Wood, and he's not like a person. And I would say with a lot of the Christian apologists, I don't really see the same kind of pressure where people are like, you need to become a Christian. It's like more like you need to explore it and see if that's right for you and if you have the right message towards that. It's not like, you know, just sign up, join the team. Like, it's kind of creepy. That sounds really cultish when people are like, join the team, instead of it being like, no, this is like a real thing. This is going to change your life, and this is a serious choice you want to make in your life. And I've seen some people try to trick shahadas. Like, it's very creepy. They're like,
oh, Issa, I got a lot to say about this. I made a short a long time ago on my YouTube channel. And basically what it is I'm just poking fun at a recent shahada at Speaker's Corner. I say recent, like back then. Because this guy, he's like a white convert, and he says the Shahada at Speaker's Corner, and all these Muslims, I mean, you know, they give him hugs and stuff, which I think, you know, that's fine, that's to be expected. But they get out like a box of sweets, and they had this box of sweets prepared, and they start offering him sweets. And I just remember thinking, what is this? Like, they had obviously known he was going to say the Shahada beforehand, because they all bought sweets with them, which is like a weird thing to bring, I guess. And it just looked really like, you know, join our club, get free sweets.
I've actually seen people give money. I've seen people give money.
Oh, yeah.
They will pay money. And I'm like, that is creepy. I'm like, people need to choose if they want that. It's manipulative to say, I'm going to give you money to convert to Islam. You know, it was interesting. And if you saw the conversation with Junior and I, he was like, I converted Rain. And Rain was like, I'm not sure that's exactly what the story was, but he's like, I converted you. Wasn't that amazing? And I'm like, this is creepy, dude. They spent like a couple of minutes talking about converting Rain. And I'm like, is this some kind of game? It's like a video game. You get points if you get people to convert, instead of it being, you know, this is like a choice, that like free will and choosing to take on this journey. Like, it's super creepy. It's really, really creepy. And I'm not comfortable with it. You know.
Yeah, same. At Speaker's Corner, there's a guy who's he's crazy. Basically, he has I don't know what he has, but he goes to Speaker's Corner all the time, and he wears a mask, and he claims to be a Muslim, but he believes he is a prophet. And he has a whole story about how he is a prophet. I've listened to him many times. I've given him my time just to make sure he's all right. But he said something to me that stuck with me, because it's one of those things that I think is probably based on actual reality. He said, "Had I been approached by Muslims with money yet?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, if you stay here long enough and you're like, you're open-minded and you're not combative, and you don't make it, you don't become a debater, so to speak, eventually a Muslim will probably offer you around $5,000." And I said, "Is this something you've seen?" And he said, "Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I'm aware they do this." And although the guy is, he's not all there, this is the kind of thing that stayed with me, because the more I was at Speaker's Corner, the more I had heard about this kind of thing happening. And I was like, wow, I think that guy's right. I think that actually there is basis to this. They have offered people money in the past. And I think sometimes it's not even like just direct cash handouts. I think sometimes it's jobs. They offer people jobs, which, if you kind of think about it, is a very similar thing as a cash handout. But yeah, it's all about being part of this group, right? Yeah, it creeps me out as well that I think that your entire eternal life in heaven or hell, you just make based on who offers you the most things, the most carnal pleasures in this life. And I find that really sad.
Well, one thing that I've learned through my studies of religion is that afterlife is this thing you call heaven and hell. It's completely different, I would say, from like a Jewish, and I would say, depending on the Christians, I would say a lot of Christians would take this perspective. And I guess Muslims will differ too, but I would say Sufis are probably more aligned with something similar to like Jews and Christians, and this idea that it's not physical stuff, it's being in the presence of the divine. And what hell is you're separated from God. You're either with God or from God. Stuff. It's not getting more and more stuff. It's not capitalism. It's not mercantilism of the afterlife. And I think that's a huge difference. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a capitalist reality. If I give someone, a poor guy, I get food, I get a palace. I'm like, this is insane. You're not actually good. You're just doing stuff to get stuff.
Yeah, it's just delayed gratification, right? It's basically like, and what annoys me about it, it's a pyramid as well. It's a pyramid scheme, because they're told that if you like contribute to the dawah, then whatever success those dawah guys have in bringing people into the ummah, they get some of that reward in Jannah. And I'm just thinking, the way it's said, because I guess maybe like theologically, I'm not sure, but in the way it's actually spoken, it's always spoken of in like a pyramid scheme, trying to get people to give you the money, right? Like, give me money and you'll get something later. And it's almost always in Ramadan, and it's always, I don't know, everything about it is like they're selling you something. And I'm like, man, we have prosperity gospels in Christianity. That's a big problem. But you guys have just like made it your thing. Ramadan is abused so much by Dawah guys. It's really sad. And what's his name? Hamza from Hamza's Den. I think he's asked for money again in Ramadan. Everyone who has like a history of asking for money waits till Ramadan to then ask for money, because they know that Muslims theologically they're more likely to give. And I'm just like, everything about this seems wrong to me. Really bothers me.
You know what bothers me too is that they mostly only give to Muslims. They won't give to other people, and that bothers me. Like I've worked at a lot of like fellowship.
Yeah,
a lot of like donations, like food services, and I've worked with Christians and Jewish food services, and the Christian ones they do like they'll do some preaching and stuff. I've seen that at certain places. Certain places they might just do a prayer. It depends, right? The Jewish ones not usually. They just kind of give out stuff. Muslim ones, there's not too many in my area. There might be like one or two, but like when I see these other kind of more Salafi oriented ones, it's really about just giving to Muslims. It's not really about giving to anyone else. Like if you're a non-Muslim, you're not getting stuff, you know, and I think that that's crazy. And a lot of Muslims come to these Christian food services. They come with kufis on. I see it. You know, they come with the jubbas, the thobes, and they come with kufis, and they come and get services from the Christian places. And I'm curious, the Salafi ones in general, like they say, we'll build mosques. Are you going to help Christian folks? Are you going to help Jewish people? Are you going to help Buddhists, Hindus? People come to your door. Is it just you're going to help Muslims? That bothers me. I'm like, you should help anyone who comes and needs help.
You know what's really sad is like, in the Christian perspective, like the church I go to, when we have donations and we pass around the collection plate and people willingly give money, that often goes to not always, like it does go to Christian charities, but it also goes to secular or non-religious or other causes as well. Like it's not just Christianity all the time. We do care about the humanity and others as well. But in Islam, I had a really funny, it's not funny at all. I had a weird chat with ChatGPT where I asked ChatGPT whether or not it was permissible to help I gave this like a really weird hypothetical. I was like, my dying Christian friend who desperately needs money, can I give him my zakat? And it was like, Islamically speaking, no. You have to give him your sadaqah, because the zakat is specifically for other Muslims. And that's the obligatory charity. That's what you're obligated to give. Sadaqah is voluntary. So I was like, okay. So any of the charity that I have to give as a Muslim, you cannot go to Christians. I was like, no. The only exception is that some scholars will say, if you're trying to convince them to join Islam, then it's permissible. So in other words, if I was like, oh, if only I had £5,000, I would totally become a Muslim, you know, then Muslims might be it might be permissible for them to give me that money to become a Muslim, according to the scholarly view. But yeah, it's sad. I find that sad.
You're right. They actually asked a question on one of those panels, and they said, one of those asked the sheikh, and they said, oh, I kind of like a progressive Muslim was like, oh yeah, I gave some of my zakat to help some poor people, which sounds like a very reasonable position. You wouldn't think there would be anything wrong with that. And then the sheikh was like, astaghfirullah azim, how dare you? You can only give it to Muslims. You have to give sadaqah. And I'm just like, I don't know. I think you should give for the sake of giving. It's not about helping a clan, a group, and a community. And I think that's just a tragic thing that one would think like that and be in that type of position, And I understand why people do that, but I think that this is the problem with literalism, is that you forget how to be good. What you do is you just, you follow a group. You're not actually striving for goodness, In Arabic, they call it like hasana, goodness. They're not striving for that. They're just striving to, for a community. It's about, service to a community. It's not service to God. It's service to a community. And I think that's tragic. It's a part of the same thing. Like when I hear, with the debate with Junior, I kind of have a problem with this. And I didn't know this growing up because I didn't have this situation. I'm like, I thought Israelite prophets were Israelite prophets, right? I would never say they're Muslim. Like, this is just a foreign idea to me to say that, like Joshua, Jeremiah, these people are Muslim. I'm like, that's insane. That's an insane proposition. How could they Muslim? They didn't pray 5 times a day. They didn't do any of this stuff. What would make them Muslim? And then I learned this kind of gimmick. Like, I didn't know about this gimmick growing up. That's what I'm saying. It's so foreign to me. This dawah is very foreign to me. They were like, well, if you submit, you are a Muslim. And I'm like, well, if you're grateful, then you're a Jew, okay? Because that's Todah. You're a Jew, so you're grateful. If you're enlightened, you're a Buddhist. If you follow Christ, you're Christian. So I'm like, this is just nonsense. This is a nonsense semantic argument. And it just blew my mind. And Junior was like, no, they are Muslim. Jesus is a Muslim and he's a Palestinian too. And I'm like, okay, all right. I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, some of the stuff they say is really, really weird. Anyway, I'm going to quickly go through. I've got a couple more super chats I just want to get through. Actually, let's do this one first. Thank you again, Inquisitive Mind. Don't forget to give Ijaz a hiding of a lifetime. Yes. He's trying to say I'm avoiding him, but I told him very clearly, like, I won't be available till probably April time when my book's published. But he seems to not want to care about this. But yes, I will debate him on the preservation of the Quran compared to biblical preservation. That will happen, and it will be glorious. Soldier of Christ says, I've noticed you've been visiting Speaker's Corner less lately. Bob and other Christians seem to be drifting, which is sad to see. We need you and other regulars to help bring them together again. Yes. So I haven't been at Speaker's Corner I last went in February sometime. I think it was February sometime. Mostly for two reasons. One, the book has taken a huge part of my time and effort. And the other one has been mostly like having a daughter now, although she's grown up pretty quick. So it's more about getting back into the habit of it. And having completed this book, I should be able to go to Speaker's Corner more often again, which is my goal. So you will see me there more frequently soon. I don't know about Bob drifting. I don't think so. Like, Bob's been there pretty consistently almost every week, actually, from what I've seen. But yeah, I know what you mean. But again, we're there, like, we watch the content and we are planning on going there. I'll also be there in June because of the NAPC conference, so I'll definitely be there then. And I am planning on being at Speaker's Corner this month on the 28th, either the 28th or 29th. Let me just check the calendar. 29th. Yeah, I'll be at Speaker's Corner on the 29th. Just a heads up. But cool. Awesome. I'm just going to look at what people said in the chat. Family time is important. Yes, it is. I have a young boy and a young girl now. And my son is 2 years and 7 months old, and my daughter is 9 months, about to be 10 months old. So increasing the family, and yeah, that does take more of my time, as it does with everyone. But yeah, I will be at the corner more in future. Anyway, someone said, Issa, will you be working on your YouTube channel? Do you have a YouTube channel, Issa?
I do. It's Issa Kabir at Issa Kabir 1535. I have some stuff from my old channel that I was on. I have several reposted videos from there, and I have like some animations that I drew. I have some stuff like that, but I'm working on a program. I talked with Dr. Wood about teaching Muslims about Christianity and Judaism. It's because I feel Muslims just don't have the knowledge on this. This is what from learning. They just don't understand the Bible. Like when even in debates, when I hear Muslims quote the Bible, they don't really understand what it means. They just are like, it sounds like it comes from a website that they're imitating, but they don't understand how it flows. They don't understand the content. So basically, my goal is to teach Muslims about like what Jews believe, what Christians believe, and how that connects with Islam. So I'm working on making a channel to teach Muslims this, because there's a lot to be learned, you know.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Someone said, hang on a second, I saw it. It was by the Trigger Christian. There we go. What's going on between Bob and Arul? So there's always a lot in in drama. It's basically just that Arul has a different perspective on things. He's from the Protestant tradition, and he has a somewhat more negative view. I won't cut the chase. He has a negative view on Roman Catholicism, and I think Eastern Orthodoxy, right? And for that reason, he thinks Bob is too sympathetic to those traditions. So he's said things about him on his channel. That's basically it. And that's what Bob was referring to when he went to speak to him. I'm on good terms with both Bob and Arul. I think Arul does amazing work. I don't share his view on Roman Catholics or Eastern Orthodox. I've tried to be a bridge between him and others at Speaker's Corner, but Arul has kind of decided to do his own thing, and you know what? That's his right to do that. So, yeah, that's where we're at. But there's no beef between me and Arul. I think Arul's pretty cool guy. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, oh, hang on, wait. Economician, says, thank you for having me on today. Wish I could have talked to Isa as well to see where we agree disagree when it comes to the Islamic dilemma. Yeah, you missed a bit when we were talking about that, and it would have been good to have your input on that, because he had a very interesting perspective on the Islamic, well, on the Quran, and I think it would have been cool to have your input, but you totally missed it. But anyway,
I'm so sorry. I was trying to do some errands at the same time, so I apologize. Next time, we'll. God
yeah,
willing.
no worries, man. You know, I get how these things are. Soldier of Christ said, "This is what I mean. That you need to be there to help unite British Christians. We have too many Muslims roaming around Speaker's Corner, and we need Christian numbers. Yeah, we absolutely do. I mean, Speaker's Corner has become an interesting place because Muslims are kind of very timid there now. In a way, like they fight each other. They fight Shia and Sunnis, and they have their own little section. But it used to be that they would like dominate everything. Now they've kind of retreated to their own area, and they don't want to talk to anyone who's a regular because they know that they know Islam, and that's really difficult for them. So they're only interested in people who are new and they haven't seen before, and they think are tourists who don't know anything about Islam. So a lot of what the Christians are doing is trying to disrupt that flow, trying to disrupt them from preying on visitors, and basically trying to raise awareness of what they're doing, so new people can be like, hey, I see what you're doing. I see what these dawah groups are doing that are like surrounding people and putting cameras in their faces and making them say things that they wouldn't want to say otherwise. So it's trying to deal with that. Muslims have retreated intellectually. They're not even there to debate anymore. It's like it's becoming harder and harder to get debaters. Every Muslim that becomes known as a debater at Speaker's Corner will very quickly just basically cease debating. So like with any known Christian debater, at least, or Jewish debater, or like atheist debater, you know, as long as the person knows Islam, Muslims can't match that level anymore. So that's kind of where we're at. But I see what you're saying, though. Yeah, it is important that we still have the Christian numbers up. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to end the live stream because it is 10 o'clock. In fact, it is 2 minutes past. I've given you an extra 2 minutes. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for saying that you'll buy my book. That means a lot to me. Those of you who mentioned that in the chat. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you, Isa. No, it means a lot to me too. It's really exciting. It's like 6 months of constant work, learning lots of stuff, figuring out how to do all this new stuff I haven't done before. Like, I'm now a wizard at Microsoft Word. Never thought I would need to be, but now I am. But yeah, it's all amazing. So God bless you, Isa. I hope and pray that one day I'll call you my Christian brother. And I wish you and your family all the best. And likewise, everyone in the chat. God bless you all. Take care, guys.
Blessings.